Welcome back. Chapter 7. It turned out the beginning was a relative term. Dean and I agreed pretty quickly that there wasn't much benefit in going all the way back to the day Roy was born or recreating Eliza's life from kindergarten forward. The summer before the murders felt like the key. That was when Roy had started acting differently, and given the fact that Dean and I had no actual idea what in the hell we were doing, it presented a manageable chunk of time to delve into. We decided that if we were going to do this, there was no point wasting time. Maybe both of us were worried the other would change their mind if we didn't get cracking. So we agreed to meet first thing the next morning. I'd woken up before my alarm and was filling a small thermos with coffee when my mom bustled into the kitchen, a laundry basket perched on her hip. "You're up early," she said to me. Yeah. I can make you some eggs if you like, or pancakes. Don't worry about it. I'll grab a granola bar. She set the basket on the kitchen table and pulled out a clean dish towel, folded it into a neat square with a snap. "Are you going somewhere?" "Meeting a friend," I said. I scooted out of the kitchen and down the hall before she could ask any more questions. I knew my hanging out with Dean was going to get back to her eventually. It wasn't the sort of thing you could hide for long in a town Ludlow's size, not when we were going to be out in public, asking questions and making nuisance of ourselves. But I wasn't prepared to have that conversation yet. It had been bad enough right after Eliza died, when I insisted there was more to the story. Every time I said the words, my mother had burst into tears as she pleaded with me to stop, and my father's eyes had taken on a faraway look, like he was retreating to a place I could never reach. I stayed away so long in part because I wasn't quite ready to watch my unrelenting need to know, but right up against my parents' pain and press hard on their open wound. We barely survived it last time. Dean and I had agreed to meet on the corner of Locust and Elm, and I tried not to scurry down the street like a fugitive. He was already at the corner when I got there, idling in a rust-speckled white SUV. "Hey," I said, hauling myself inside. "Morning." "You have to give that door a hard slam to get it shut." I yanked on the door as instructed, hit the manual lock for good measure. "I was a little worried you might not show up, leave me hanging." He glanced at me. "I wouldn't do that." I took a swig of coffee from the thermos and then held it out, but he shook his head. "Where are we headed?" I asked. We decided to start by digging into Roy's life, and I left it up to Dean to figure out our first steps. "Stafford," he said, drumming his finger against the cracked steering wheel. "Piece of shit auto graveyard out on 47. It's where Roy worked the couple of years before the murders. He dropped out of high school and after his junior year and went to work for Merle." I had a vague notion of where Dean was taking us. The auto salvage everyone glimpsed off in the distance every time you drove between Ludlow and Neosho. But I never actually turned down the gravel road and visited the place, which turned out to have been a smart move considering the number of tires swallowing potholes Dean had to navigate around just to get us there. If your car wasn't shot to shit before you arrived at Stafford, it would be by the time you braved the narrow gravel driveway and pulled up in the weed-infested front lot. The entire patch of land was covered in junk cars as far as the eye could see. Some there long enough they appeared to be growing out of the ground. Flat tires melting into the dirt, green shoots of plants weaving out of shattered window sills and wrapping around the rusting frame. The wind gusted in off the prairie, moaning and sighing as it swept through the metal husks. "Word of warning," Dean said as I reached to unbuckle my seatbelt. "Merle Stafford is kind of a dick. Try not to take it personally." Before I could ask any follow-up questions, excuse me. Before I could ask any follow-up question, an overweight man of indeterminate age, wearing dirty overalls and a pit-stained wife beater, appeared from the dark doorway of the garage nearest our car. He had long gray hair tied in a ponytail at the nape of his neck, and despite his size, he moved gracefully and quicker than you'd expect at first glance. He wiped his hands on a grease-encrusted rag and glared at us. "Hi there, Merle," Dean said, exiting the car and motioning for me to follow. "What the fuck you want?" Merle said. "And who is she?" "She's local, from Ludlow." Merle ran his gaze from me back to Dean. Didn't ask where she was from. Asked who the fuck she was. I stepped forward. "My name is Greer. I'm a friend of Dean's." Merle stared at me, hawked up a brownish loogie and spit it at my feet, then turned and disappeared into the dank garage. Ew, that's nasty. "Kind of a dick," I whispered to Dean, and he elbowed me gently in the ribs. "Well, you coming or not?" Merle bellowed. "I ain't got all fucking day." I followed Dean into the garage, stepping around abandoned car parks and puddles of oil. Merle was already back to work, systematically ripping apart a sad little Honda that had seen better days even before Merle got his hands on it. "Won't keep you long," Dean said, leaning back against the cluttered workbench. "We want to ask you a few questions about Roy." "We?" Merle asked, turning his gaze to me. "What fucking business is it of hers?" He stared at me with flat eyes, and my stomach dropped to somewhere in the vicinity of my toes. I suspected people might call Merle a lot of things, but a dog with no bite wasn't ever going to be one of them. "Don't worry about her," Dean said, voice even. Slowly, Merle turned his gaze back to Dean. "Last I heard, your lazy, thieving brother was dead. What's the point of asking questions now?" I watched Dean's jaw tighten up and then release, and I admired his self-control. I suspected over the last decade he'd had lots of practice. Roy never did tell the cops why he did it. Never told me either. I'd rest easier if I knew. Merle stepped away from the car, fished a tin of tobacco from his pocket, and tucked a healthy wad into his gum, using his tongue to work it into position. "Don't like what your brother did?" he said. "But don't like what happened to him either. Government ain't got no business killing people, not with how often they screw up everything else." He twisted his head, spat onto the concrete floor. "What you want to know?" Dean pushed himself away from the workbench, moved a little closer to Merle. I stayed where I was, tried to melt into the background. I had a feeling the less Merle saw of me, a stranger he didn't trust, the looser his lips might be. "How was Roy that summer? Did you notice anything different about him?" Merle grunted. "Not really. Only thing stood out was he started helping himself to my till. Been working here for almost 2 years and all of a sudden started stealing. Only a little at a time, $5 here, $10 there. That's why it took me so long to notice. Fired his ass the day I figured out. Should have beat his ass while I was at it." "How long before the murders did the stealing start?" Dean asked. "Let me check my calendar," Merle said, rolling his eyes. "Hell, I don't know, but not more than a month or 2, maybe 3. "Did he say what he needed the money for?" "Nope. I didn't bother asking. Don't care if he was using it to save a dying orphan. Wasn't his goddamn money to take." "Did you notice anything hanging around here that summer? Was Roy spending time with anyone new?" Merle snorted, sucking film down his throat, and turned back to the Honda. "I never paid any attention to what Roy was doing that didn't involve work. He could have rolled up here with a goddamn Dallas Cowboys cheerleader in his car, and I wouldn't pay no mind so long as he did his job." "That's a no then," Dean pressed. Merle was bent over at the waist working under the hood, and he shook his head back and forth. Slow, letting out a long stream of air. He reminded me of a bull, one wrong move away from a full-on charge. That's a no, he said finally. Now get the fuck out of here and let me work. I didn't speak until we were safely back in the car headed down the drive. Well, I said, he seems great, real charmer. Dean snorted out a laugh. He's worse than I remembered. Do you think he's telling the truth? With Merle, it's hard to say. He'd have no problem lying for any reason or no reason at all. But I also don't know why he's bothered. I seriously doubt he's covering up some big secret about Roy. Like he said, all he cared about was the work getting done. Did you know Roy was stealing from him? Dean shook his head. No, I hadn't heard that before. I've got no idea what Roy was doing. What's the point of stealing $10 here and there, especially from a guy like Merle? That's risking your life for a pretty measly reward. Could he have been saving up for the gun? I don't think so. Merle would have noticed sooner if he'd taken that much, even over time. And after Roy was arrested, my grandmother realized her engagement ring was missing. She had to stop wearing it when her arthritis got too bad. Pretty sure Roy hawked it to pay for the gun. He signed, rubbed the back of his neck with his free hand. I spent 2 years looking for that ring. Probably hit every pawn shop in a 100-mile radius. No luck? No luck. At the end of the day, it was just one more shitty thing Roy did to our grandmother. I watched Browning stalk a week whip by, the sky bright and enormous after the dark of Merle's garage. How did Roy last working at that place for 2 years? Dean's hand tightened on the wheel. He didn't have a lot of choice. He was good with his hands, but not with people. He got frustrated easily and lost his temper. Merle might have been a grade A asshole, but he mainly left Roy alone. What about you? What about me? Where did you work? I realized I knew next to nothing about Dean, not how he usually spent his days, or where he lived, or who his friends were. All of this should have felt awkward, spending time with a virtual stranger, especially one connected to Roy. But Dean was easy to be around in a way I hadn't anticipated after all my years of resenting him from a distance. I helped Jack Stedman farm his land. His wife, Mary Ellen, was my history teacher in high school. I think she probably felt sorry for me, if I'm being honest. I wasn't a total dumbass, but school was never my strong suit. Pretty clear I wasn't going away to college, even if I could have afforded it. And Jack was getting older. Their kids had all up and moved away, and he needed help. When Mary Ellen asked me if I wanted a job after graduation, I couldn't think of any good reason to say no. Do you like it? I didn't at first. People think farming is just throwing some seeds in the ground and waiting, but it's more complicated than that. It's hard, thankless work at a lot of time. You're at the mercy of the weather, and there's nothing worse than depending on something you can't control. But I got used to it, got better at it. Now I can't imagine doing anything else. Start to get a little claustrophobic when I spend too much time indoors. I work the line at the meatpacking plant during the winters, and I practically count down the hours until I get back to the fields again. He gave his head a little shake. Sorry, I'm talking too much. No, you're not, I said. What are you going to do? What are we going to do? Ride around in silence? Fair point, Dean said. Heard you're a school counselor. Yeah, I am. But where'd you hear that? He took one hand off the steering wheel, flapped it through the air. I don't know, around, he paused. Makes sense. I jerked my head back a little in surprise. I never thought it made sense. Had never heard anyone else who knew me say it did either. And how's that? You're a good listener. Huh? I said, maybe, although personally I didn't think not want to talk was the same thing as being a skilled listener. Hungry? Dean asked, pointed up ahead to the Sonic on the side of the road. They serve breakfast now. Wait a minute. They serve breakfast now? As teenager, Eliza and I had made countless trips to Sonic for cheeseburger and onion rings, vanilla Coke, and root beer floats. Our dad always muttering that he didn't understand why we had to drive 5 miles down the road for the same food they serve at the diner right up the street in Ludlow. Oh, yeah, Dean said, you haven't lived until you tried their breakfast burrito. Okay, I'm game. We pulled into one of the stalls at Sonic, and I told Dean to order me whatever he usually got, which turned out to be a breakfast burrito and a side of tater tots. Remember when they used to bring out your food wearing roller skates? I asked. I can't believe they never got sued by their employees. I swear somebody used to go ass over tea kettle at least once a week. Food flying everywhere. We used to rank the likelihood someone would fall based on how much the tray wobbled when they skated, out the door. I laughed at the memory, thankful that Dean had reminded me of one that wasn't marred by what came later. When our server approached the car, it was on very practical tennis shoes. I hadn't thought I was hungry, but as soon as the smell hit my nose, I all but inhaled my first tater tot. Oh my God, I said, what do they put in these? Grease and carbs, the two best food groups. These were always Eliza's favorite. She could eat a large order in about 10 seconds flat. Dean didn't respond, and I glanced at him. Does it bother you when I talk about her? I hadn't realized until that moment how long it had been since I actually spoken about Eliza. I thought that here, in this car with Dean, I didn't have to worry about hurting anyone but myself by bringing her up. But maybe I've been wrong. And why is that? Dean shook his head. No, it doesn't bother me. We're going to have to talk about all three of them if we're serious about trying to figure this out. I took a big bite of the burrito, using a mouthful of cheese and eggs to avoid engaging. It was one thing to wander around town asking questions about Roy. It was another to sit next to his brother and hear personal stories, to acknowledge that Dean had lost someone too. I've already told you Roy was acting weird that summer, he said. But what about Eliza or Travis? How did they seem? Normal, for what I can remember. Totally devoted to each other. Busy with their summer jobs. They were talking about applying to college. Eliza was excited about her 18th birthday coming up in September. Regular summer before senior year stuff. Nothing stands out. What about right before the murders? Did anything change? I picked a jalapeno out of my burrito and flicked it in my napkin. Not really. I tore off a piece of tortilla and rolled it into a tiny ball, dropped it next to the jalapeno. What are you not saying? He asked. Nothing, I responded too quickly. This is only going to work if we tell each other the truth. How do you know I'm not telling you something? He pointed at my napkin. You get fidgety. Huh? It was almost strange when someone figured out something about me that you barely knew yourself. Like maybe all your private, not for public consumption quirks weren't hidden after all. That after so many years of keeping people at a distance, it really only took one observant person to pry open a lid I thought was permanently locked. The idea was both horrifying and strangely comforting. It's probably nothing, I said. I told Sheriff Baker about it at a time, and he didn't seem too concerned. Yeah, well, he'd probably say we're insane for doing this. Who cares what he think? Dean had a point there. What was it? he asked again, voice gentle, like he was coaxing a skittish animal out of hiding. This was what I always wanted, wasn't it? Someone to ask the right questions, to sit next to me and really listen to the answers. But I've been silent for so long, it was harder than I imagined to find my own voice. It was the night of the murders, I said finally. Eliza was getting ready for her date with Travis, and I was running out the door to meet my friends when she stopped me. She said she had something to talk to me about, and it was important. But I told her I was late and she'd have to tell me the next day. I left before she could say anything. That's it? Dean said. Did she give you any clue as to what it was about? I shook my head. She didn't seem upset, really, and she wasn't like grabbing my arm or trying to force me to stay, but I could tell it was something important from the look on her face. She always got a crease right here when she was serious. I lifted a finger between my brows, my heart squeezing when I brushed it over my skin. It was definitely something she wanted me to hear. Dean leaned his head back on the headrest, looked out the windshield. Could it have been about her and Travis planning to elope or something? No way. That wasn't Eliza's style, not getting married at 18 and not running away to do it either. I paused. I definitely got the feeling it had to do with me. Dean swung his head in my direction without lifting it from the headrest. Why do you say that? I shrugged. No reason really, just a hunch. I thought about Eliza's face in those last minutes I spent with her. There had been concern in her eyes, but not fear. A little sadness maybe, reluctant tempered with resolve. Whatever she'd been going to tell me, she knew I wouldn't like it. But she was going to say it anyway, and I had no idea, even all these years later, what it might have been. Dean signed, scrubbed his hand across his jaw. Who knew everybody would be so good at keeping secrets? We were teenagers, I reminded him. Secrets were all we had. And that's the end of chapter 7. Okay, so Eliza wanted to tell Greer something. Now Greer thinks that it was something concerning her. What could it possibly be? They were teenagers. And could she have been pregnant? No, so she said it was something that she felt like it was concerning her. And that Greer wouldn't like it. I don't know. I can't tell yet. I'm going to need some more information. So with that, I'm going to see y'all in the next chapter. Bye for now.